Hello, my name is Marta Pimentel, and today we will be discussing Chapter 2 Population and Health. Kieshu 1. Where are people distributed? Introduction. Studying population is important for three main reasons. More people are alive at this time than ever before. Nearly all global population growth comes from less developed countries, and Earth's population experienced a rapid increase during the second half of the 20th century. The scientific study of population characteristics is demography. Geographers are interested in two population characteristics that explain the relationship between population and natural resources. One of them is carrying capacity, which is the maximum population size that the environment can sustain indefinitely given the available resources. The sustainability of the environment often relies on characteristics of the environment and human actions to modify it. Another characteristic is overpopulation, which is the number of people exceeding the capacity of the environment to support life. An example can be seen in Delhi, India. As the world is growing to be more globalized, geographers argue that certain regions are burdened with an unfavorable balance between population and natural resources, which is what causes overpopulation. We must learn that regions with the most people are different from those without a balance between the two. Distribution. Geographers begin the study of population by examining where Earth's 8 billion people are distributed through two properties: concentration, which we will discuss in this slide, and density. Population portions. The world can be divided into seven portions, which can be seen on this map. The cyan portion of the map is approximately the same size as India and eastern China, and the small Asian portions inhabit the world's largest number of people living there. Keep in mind that people are not distributed evenly around the world. Population concentrations. Two-thirds of the population is clustered in four regions that we must keep in mind throughout the unit: East Asia, South Asia, Europe, and Southeast Asia. In addition to this, Africa's two most populous areas are in between Senegal and Nigeria, which is in the west coast of Africa, as well as between Eritrea and South Africa, which are in the east coast of Africa. North America's heavily concentrated areas include northeastern United States and southeastern Canada. These concentrated areas tend to be low-lying areas with fertile soil and temperate climate, attracting human beings to live there as they can practice activities such as agriculture. Sparsely inhabited areas, though, are too wet, too dry, too cold, or too mountainous for agriculture, which is why people avoid these areas. Examples of these areas can be seen in North Africa and Southwest Asia, which are areas that are too dry, Greenland, which is near the northern hemisphere where it's too cold, and Latin America, where countries such as Chile are too mountainous, or areas near Colombia and Venezuela are too wet. Choropleth map. This map demonstrates the areas that are heavily concentrated, which is seen in India and eastern China as the dark red countries, and the areas that are sparse are the gray colored countries. Population cartogram and ecumeny. Population concentrations can be displayed through cartograms. They depict the sizes of countries according to populations. The scale is used to show the amount of people each color represents. In this image below, we can see a world cartogram that is depicting the countries through sizes. As I said before, India and Eastern China are the countries that are largely populated, which is why they are bigger than the other countries and are the dark orange countries. Below the 50 million are the smaller countries with the light yellow. Ecumeny is the portion of Earth occupied by human settlement. Areas that were once considered too harsh for humans have diminished, increasing permanent human settlement. Throughout history, these settlements have existed in Southwest Asia, Eastern Europe, and Eastern Asia. Only three-fourths of the world's population live on 5% of Earth's surface due to many oceans, which consist of 71% of the world. In these maps, you can see the evolution of human settlement increasing as time goes by. Population density, the amount of people living in a specific area. Geographers use three different measures of population density to further explore the population in certain areas. Arithmetic density is the total number of objects in an area. In population geography, this density refers to the population divided by the total land area. The higher the density, the more an area is densely populated, and the lower the density, the more it's sparsely populated. This allows geographers to compare the number of people living in each region. Countries that are high in arithmetic density are the dark red, and countries that are low in arithmetic density are the bright yellow. Physiological density, the number of people per unit area of arable land. Arable land, as we learned before, is land suited for agriculture. We compute it by dividing the number of people by the total number of arable land. Comparing this density with arithmetic density allows geographers to see how much food land needs to produce for the needs of people. Huge difference between the both indicates that a country's land is not arable. An example can be seen in Egypt, which has a huge difference between both densities, indicating that its land is not suitable for agriculture. As a result, all but 5% of the country's population live in areas near the Nile River where the land is moisturized and available for agriculture. The higher the number, the more food needs to be plotted as more people live in the arable land. At times, we might have to rely on other countries to import food to feed the people living in the arable land. And last but not least, agricultural density, the ratio of the number of farmers to the amount of arable land. This density allows geographers to notice economic differences between different countries. Lower agricultural density means that those areas rely on technology to farm extensive land and feed people. Examples can be seen in more developed countries. Higher agricultural density means that areas rely on farmers to produce food. Examples can be seen in less developed countries, more specifically Egypt, which we discussed before. Thank you for listening.
Issue 2. Why is population increasing? Natural increase. Natural increase rate is the percentage by which a population grows in a year. This does not include migration. In the 20th century, the NIR has been 1.2, meaning the world population has been growing 1.2% each year. More than 95% of the NIR is in developing countries, such as East Asia, Southeast Asia and the South Pacific, Southwest, Central, and North Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Latin America. Population growth history. The all-time peak of the natural increase rate is 2.1% in the 1960s. Now the NIR is 1.2. All of this affects the double time rate, which is the number of years needed to double the population assuming a constant rate of increase. Fertility. Crude birth rate. The crude birth rate is the total number of live births in a year for every 1,000 people alive in a society. An example is a CBR of 20 means that for every 1,000 people in a country, 20 babies are born over a 1-year time period. The world map of CBR mirrors the distribution of NIR. The highest CBR is in Sub-Saharan Africa, and the lowest CBR is in Europe. Total fertility rate measures the number of births in a society, the average number of children a woman will have throughout her childbearing years, roughly ages 15 through 49. The TFR for the world as a whole is 2.4. Again, the highest is in Sub-Saharan Africa at 4.9. The lowest is in Europe at 1.6. Mortality. Infant mortality rate is the annual number of deaths of infants under 1 year of age, compared with total live births. This usually represents how good the healthcare is in that country. Lower IMRs are usually found in highly developed countries, where there are good hospitals and well-trained doctors. Higher IMRs are found in less developed countries, where the hospitals are small and with little supplies. The IMR in Europe is 4, compared to Sub-Saharan Africa, where the IMR is 54. Mortality. Crude death rate is the total number of deaths in a year for every 1,000 people alive in a society. CDR does not follow the same regional patterns as NIR and CBR. The highest CDR is 16 per 1,000 people, and the lowest is 1. Demographic transition. Demographic transition is a process of change in society's population from high crude birth and death rates and low rate of natural increase to a condition of low crude birth and death rates, low rate of natural increase, and a higher total population. There are 4 total stages and a possible 5th. Stage 1. Low growth. In stage 1, there is a very high CBR, a very high CDR, and a very low NIR. Most of human history was spent in stage 1. In this stage, people depended on hunting and gathering. There was low growth because food was hard to find. As of right now, there is no country in the world that is in stage 1. Stage 2, high growth. In stage 2, there is high CBR, rapidly declining CDR, and a very high NIR. In this stage, we have a high increase in population. Europe and the US entered this stage in 1750 as a result of the Industrial Revolution. In developing countries such as Africa, Asia, and Latin America, they didn't go through this stage until 1950, caused by the medical revolution. An example is Gambia. Gambia entered stage 2 around 1970 when the World Health Organization launched a program to immunize children, which brought down the CDR and raised the INR. Stage 3 of the demographic transition is moderate growth. In moderate growth, there is rapidly declining CBR, moderately declining CDR, and moderate NIR. This stage occurred when people start having less children and less people dying. This is because people are more likely to live in cities, not farms, where a large family can be useful. Most countries in Europe and North America moved to stage 3 in the first half of the 20th century. An example is Mexico. Mexico entered stage 2 because of a high CBR, because the government thought it would help the economy, but entered stage 3 in 1974 when a constitutional amendment allowed families to choose how many children to have, which promoted family planning and a declining crude birth rate. Stage 4, low growth. In stage 4, there is very low CBR, low or slightly increasing CDR, zero or negative NIR. This causes zero population growth, a decline of total fertility rate to the point where the natural increase rate equals zero. This may occur when the CBR is slightly higher than the CDR because some females die before reaching their childbearing years, and the number of women in their childbearing years may vary. Women in this stage mostly enter the labor force instead of being stay-at-home mothers. An example is Denmark. Denmark entered the stage 4 in 1970s with a roughly equal CBR and CDR. The CDR is unlikely to decline unless another medical revolution finds the cure for cancer so the elderly can live longer.
Key issue 3. Why does health vary by region? Medical services. Distribution across medical facilities from MDCs compared to LDCs. Most parts of Europe have more than 50 beds for 10,000 people in medical facilities. Meanwhile, most of Central America has less than 25 per 10,000 people. Cost of healthcare tends to also be a large issue. MDCs paying around 30% of the cost of healthcare, but LDCs have to pay around more than half the cost of little government funding. Healthcare expenditures per capita ranges from $100 in LDCs to over $1,000 in MDCs. Health and gender. Maternal mortality rate is the annual number of female deaths per capita per 100,000 live births. The rate is around 500 in Africa, while in Europe it's only 8. The biggest cause of these deaths is heavy bleeding. Baby girls at risk in China and India due to gender-based sex selection. 700,000 babies go missing yearly in these countries, estimated to be around 117 million missing in total. This is occurring due to the sex ratio in these highly populated countries, being the female 73% and male 27%. Health and aging. Life expectancy is exponentially higher in advanced countries compared to LDCs. Life expectancy is the total number of years a human is expected to live in a country. The potential support ratio is the number of working age people divided by the elderly population. The world's ratio is 9. A population pyramid is a bar graph that displays the percentage of the place's population for each age. The dependency ratio is the number of people who are too young or too old to work compared to people in their productive age. The epidemiologic transition describes changing patterns of population distributions in relation to changing patterns of mortality, fertility, and life expectancy, and leading causes of death. Stage 1: Pestilence and Famine. Stage 1 epidemics are pandemics are the largest cause of deaths as well as accidents and attacks by animals and other people. An epidemic is the spread of an infectious disease within a community at a particular time. A pandemic is an epidemic that spreads to a worldwide scale and affects a large amount of the world population. An extreme example of this stage is the Black Plague, which was transmitted from fleas to rats, which infected around 25 million people. Receding pandemics. Stage 2 is the stage of receding pandemics due to advances in sanitation, nutrition, and medicine to reduce infectious diseases. The mapping technique that anticipated GIS helped explain and fight the cholera pandemic in the 19th century London. The creation of the handheld GIS by John Snow allowed the mapping of water pumps in the city to represent sources of water for poor residents. It was then seen that most of the infections were around a single water pump that was unsanitary, now shown that cholera is prominent from unclean drinking water. Stage 3: Degenerative diseases. Stage 3 is the decrease of deaths by disease and increased death by chronic disorders related to age. Main disorders are cardiovascular diseases, heart attacks, and cancer. LDCs have the lowest rates of cancer, while MDCs have the highest rates. LDCs have a lower rate of cancer because of lower life expectancy. Stage 4. Stage 4 is the extended part of the transition that says major degenerative causes of death is cardiovascular diseases and cancer stay, but the life expectancy rises due to medical advances. Medicine can slow the spread of cancer and even remove it, which can increase life expectancy. Stage 4 countries also tend to have better diets with reduced alcohol and tobacco. Although death rates increase due to drugs, which are prescription and legal in non-nutritious food, opioids have a high death rate even when prescribed, can cause addiction, and lead to overdose.
Why might population change in the future? Chapter 2, Key Issue 4. Population Futures. The United Nations estimates that the world population in 2100 will be 11.2 billion. If the UN's highest estimate is followed, world population in 2100 would more than double to 16.2 billion. If the low variant is followed, world population would actually decline to 7.2 billion. Possible demographic transition stage 5. After several decades of very low birth rates, a stage 5 country would have relatively few young women aging into childbearing years. If the demographic transition is to include a stage 5, Japan will be one of the world's first countries to reach it. In addition to Japan, several European countries, notably Russia and other former communist countries, already have negative NIRs. China and India. A pro-natalist policy is a government policy that supports higher birth rates, whereas an anti-natalist policy is one that supports lower birth rates. The core of the Chinese government's family planning program was the one-child policy. A couple needed a permit to have a child. Largely as a result of the one-child policy, China's CBR declined from 18 in 1980 to 12 in 2018. Lowering CBR through education and healthcare. With more women being able to attend school and to remain in school longer, they would be more likely to learn employment skills and gain more economic control over their lives. With better education, women would understand reproductive rights better, choose smarter reproductive choices, and select better contraceptive options. With better healthcare programs, IMRs would decline with programs like counseling about sexually transmitted diseases and child immunization. With the survival of more infants ensured, women most likely would choose more effective contraceptives for family planning. Lowering CBR through contraceptives. The most effective way to increase use of contraceptives is to distribute more of them cheaply and quickly. Women using contraception in sub-Saharan Africa is especially low because of the reluctance of men to use them. Adherents of many religions have convictions that prevent them from using some or all contraceptives. And in many places, opposition is strong to terminating pregnancy by abortion. Epidemiologic futures. CDR rises because more of the population is elderly. Infectious diseases that were thought to have been eradicated or controlled have returned. 3 reasons to help explain the possible emergence of a stage 5 of the epidemiologic transition: evolution, poverty, and diffusion. Reason for possible stage 5: evolution. Environmental pressures by developing resistance to drugs and insecticides causes microbes to continue to evolve and change. Malaria was nearly eradicated by using DDT in places the mosquitoes with the parasite were located. Malaria now causes around 500,000 deaths a year worldwide because mosquitoes have evolved to be resistant to DDT. Reason for possible stage 5: poverty. Unsanitary conditions may persist, and most people can't afford the drugs needed for treatment in poorer areas. Tuberculosis is more prevalent in poorer areas because the long, expensive treatments causes an economic burden. Reason for possible stage 5: increased connections. When people travel, they carry diseases with them and are exposed to diseases of others. Worldwide, 35 million people died of AIDS since the beginning of the epidemic through 2017. Sub-Saharan Africa holds 26 million of the world's 37 million HIV-positive people. California, Texas, Florida, and New York accounted for half the country's new AIDS causes in the peak year of 1993 for the United States. Although HIV-positive people are found in large urban areas, Louisiana and Georgia now have the largest rate of new HIV-positive diagnoses. Population and resources. Malthus claimed that the population was growing much more rapidly than Earth's food supply because population increased geometrically, whereas food supply increased arithmetically. Neo-Malthusians. Malthus' views remain influential today. Contemporary geographers and other analysts are always taking another look at Malthus' views because of Earth's unprecedented rate of natural increase during the late 20th century. Now, relatively poor countries are in stage 2, but in Malthus' time, few relatively wealthy countries had entered stage 2 of the demographic transition. Neo-Malthusians argue that the world faces a frightening future in which billions of people are in desperate competition for food, water, and energy. Neo-Malthusians and critics. Worldwide, carrying capacity in terms of food production has increased during the past half-century, somewhat more rapidly than Malthus predicted. Relating to population, his model expected population to quadruple during a half-century, which it is not. In Africa, rapid population growth has led to the inability of the land to sustain life in parts of the region.